It's all covered in today's China Truths.
From Guangzhou to the rest of China, a wave of misery is sweeping across the nation. Streets once alive with energy are now filled with beggars and despair. Once hailed as the most dynamic city in southern China, Guangzhou has lost all vitality. Locals say they've never seen it this tragic. Where staying feels even worse than fleeing back to the countryside. Those dreaming of making a living here are warned. Give up. A salary of just $400 to $800 a month can't cover the suffocating heat, cramped apartments, swarms of rats and cockroaches, and crushing pressure. In Shanghai, the delivery industry has turned into a desperate refuge. Even workers with master's and doctoral degrees are riding motorbikes to survive. Degrees no longer guarantee jobs. Without one, you can't even deliver food. Social policies are in chaos, labor insurance abandoned, unemployment soaring, factories are collapsing, small businesses are drained of cash, and waves of layoffs sweep through every city. A viral video from Langfang showed men in their 50s begging after failing to find work. Their heartbreaking words shocked millions. At this age, how can I beg? But I must, just to eat. In Guangzhou and other cities, companies owe months of wages. Some vanish overnight, leaving workers stranded. Once bustling malls are now ghost towns. Families sink into debt. Businesses close without warning, swallowing customers' deposits and destroying lives. Stories of despair flood in. A woman forced to mortgage her home became a single mother drowning in debt. An investor lost 2 million yuan in a year. Middle-aged workers spend months jobless, crammed into shabby rentals, comparing themselves to peers with stable careers, and breaking inside. Even workers at billion-yuan corporations are suddenly laid off. Fresh graduates send out hundreds of resumes, only to land unpaid internships or $200-a-month jobs. For many, survival, not happiness, has become the only goal. Everywhere, exhaustion consumes both workers and entrepreneurs. One worker carries the load of two. Women take on men's labor. Men work like beasts of burden. Business owners grind themselves down like machines. Statistics reveal the cruel truth. 936 million people live on less than $280 a year. Companies even produce human livestock feed, industrial nutrition packs that keep people alive, just like factory farm chickens. Across China, millions wander like headless flies, migrating from city to city with suitcases in hand, only to be rejected. No men, no uneducated workers, no one over 40. Those are the new hiring rules. The young are lost, the middle-aged discarded, the elderly abandoned. Society feels like a volcano ready to explode. Now panic spreads to China's elites. In Shenyang, malls are empty, but U.S. visa lines stretch for days. Thousands crowding outside embassies. Some cry in despair after multiple rejections. Others are arrested for forged bank books, fake pensions, even sham marriages. Bloggers warn, documents can be faked, but reality cannot be hidden. From Guangzhou's crumbling streets to Beijing's desperate visa queues, one truth echoes louder than ever. China is collapsing from within, and no one is safe. A travel expert bluntly revealed U.S. visas are keeping more than half of China's tourism industry alive. Almost everyone applying to Europe, Australia, or the UK only does so for one purpose: to strengthen their chance at a U.S. visa. Yet this wave of applications contrasts with another reality. The number of Chinese students in America is collapsing. Amid escalating U.S.-China tensions, Chinese students are facing unprecedented scrutiny. Returning home, many are treated with suspicion, accused of lacking loyalty, and even labeled potential spies. Employers openly blacklist overseas graduates. Dong Mingzhu, chairwoman of GRI, once said coldly, "We do not hire students who studied abroad. They could be spies." The result? Thousands of young people are trapped in limbo. Take Mr. Lian, who studied statistics in the U.S. for 3 years. He sent out more than 70 resumes to state-owned banks. He didn't receive a single reply. Another graduate applied to 400 jobs and got just 3 offers. Families who poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into American education are now asking, was it worth it? The numbers speak for themselves. Chinese students in the U.S. have fallen from 373,000 in 2019-2020 to just 271,000 in 2023-2024. Many are turning to Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, or Europe. But for those determined to flee China's suffocating control, the U.S. is still the ultimate destination. Surveys show nearly three-quarters still choose America for the freedom it offers. Female students especially want to stay. Nearly half say they plan to settle there permanently. Meanwhile, China's wealthy are leaving in record numbers. In 2023, 13,800 millionaires emigrated, the most in the world. By the end of 2024, that number is set to break 15,000. Luxury villa compounds in Beijing, once symbols of untouchable wealth, now stand empty, weeds taking over driveways, mansions converted into shabby offices. And then, there's the strange scene at China's northern border. On May 15, 2025, Beijing launched a one-way visa-free policy with Russia. In just minutes, Russians ferried into Heilongjiang, dragging suitcases to stock up on cheaper goods. But here's the catch. Moscow never gave the same privilege to Chinese citizens. It was a unilateral move by Beijing. Worse still, bloggers warn that a Russian entry stamp could sabotage future U.S. or European visa applications. If you dream of going west, don't run to Russia now, they cautioned. Beijing may preach about friendship with Moscow, but social media tells the truth. People's real dream is escape. Scholar Kai Xia put it best. No matter how strong the propaganda, people are voting with their feet. They don't want to stay. From endless visa queues outside U.S. embassies, to abandoned villas of the elite, to Russians flooding across the border. One reality is undeniable. China is in the middle of an unprecedented exodus. And until freedom, democracy, and a normal society return for countless Chinese, the dream of home will remain nothing but an illusion.
It's all covered in today's China Truths.
Deep in Ecuador's Amazon rainforest stands the Coca-Codo-Sinclair Dam, a $3.2 billion megadream that was supposed to power the nation for generations. Instead, it has turned into a global symbol of China's tofu drag exports. Engineers have found more than 17,000 cracks crawling through its concrete. A dam that should last 50 years may not even survive 20. And this is no accident. It's the same story repeated from Asia to Africa. Beijing funds flashy mega projects, cuts corners with cheap construction, and leaves behind a trail of dangerous infrastructure and crushing debt. What looks like development often becomes nothing more than a debt trap dressed up as generosity. Now, in Ecuador, history repeats itself. Power China, formerly Sino-Hydro, a state-backed giant under Xi Jinping's government, has swooped back in with a $400 million deal to fix the very mess it created. On paper, it's framed as compensation. In reality, it tightens Beijing's grip on Ecuador's most important source of energy. Because with China, one thing never changes. Nothing comes free, and every crack in the dam reveals an even deeper crack in the promise of win-win cooperation. Decades earlier, local engineers envisioned a modest plan to harness the Coca River. That vision transformed under President Rafael Correa, who turned to Beijing for funding. With 85% of the financing coming through oil-backed loans from China, Sino-Hydro was awarded the contract and the design ballooned into a colossal 1,500 megawatt plant, the biggest hydroelectric facility in Ecuador's history. The promises sounded dazzling: energy independence, cleaner power, and thousands of jobs. But the budget quickly spiraled from less than $1 billion to over $3.2 billion. When the dam finally opened with fireworks and speeches, reality hit hard. Instead of producing the projected 8,800 gigawatt hours of electricity annually, it barely managed around 6,500. And despite its massive turbines, the plant almost never ran at full output. By the end of 2024, as blackouts stretched to 14 hours a day across Ecuador, Coca-Codo-Sinclair was functioning at only a third of its intended capacity. Now, with forecasts of severe drought, the danger of even more power shortages looms. The ground beneath the dam is unstable, and the cracks are multiplying. El Mercurio reports that since operations began in 2016, 1,761 structural fractures have been documented. But the problem started long before opening day. In 2015, Ecuador Times revealed that engineers had already flagged 7,648 defects in the water distributors. Quick fixes with sloppy welds hid the flaws but never solved them. By 2018, a report from Ecuador's Controller's Office, cited by the Los Angeles Times, harshly criticized Sinahydro for using cheap, substandard materials and dangerous construction methods. Inspectors even warned that parts of the dam might need to be demolished and rebuilt. Former Energy Minister Fernando Santos later admitted what many suspected. Chinese-funded projects were overpriced, poorly executed, and most glaringly, the $2.8 billion Coca-Codo-Sinclair Dam was the worst of them all. Its location only deepened the crisis. Research by Sebastian Naranjo Silva and Juliana Romero Barromeo pointed out the dam was built right beside the active Reventador volcano, in a region extremely prone to erosion. Within just 3 years, the Coca River chewed away 13 kilometers of land upstream, inching dangerously close to the dam's water intake. Then came the disaster of 2020. Infobay reported how a giant sinkhole swallowed San Rafael Falls, the tallest waterfall in Ecuador, erasing a natural wonder overnight. The collapse unleashed a wave of sediment racing downstream. In only a few years, nearly 500 million tons of mud and rock have surged through the river system, destroying farmland, tearing apart oil pipelines, and wrecking ecosystems across the Amazon basin. Communities lost clean water, fisheries vanished, and tourism crashed. Meanwhile, the erosion continues to creep closer to Coca-Codo-Sinclair, and the costs are not just environmental. The financial burden is crushing. Most of the dam's funding came from China's Export-Import Bank, which lent Ecuador $1.7 billion, but at punishing terms. The loan carried 7% interest for 15 years, far higher than rates available from the World Bank or Inter-American Development Bank. That means Ecuador must pay about $125 million annually in interest before even touching the principal. For a nation already buried in debt, the deal turned into a financial straitjacket, locking Ecuador's energy future into China's grip. Ecuador's biggest dam project didn't just drown in technical problems, it was also tainted by corruption. A Reuters probe revealed a web of bribery worth tens of millions tied directly to Coca-Codo-Sinclair. Prosecutors even linked former President Lenin Moreno, who governed from 2017 to 2021, to alleged payoffs connected with dam contracts. In total, 36 people stand accused, with investigators estimating as much as $76 million in bribes exchanged between 2009 and 2018. But money was never China's gift. It always came with strings. And in Ecuador's case, those strings were barrels of oil. As the Los Angeles Times uncovered, ex-President Rafael Correa struck deals that forced Ecuador to sell millions of barrels of crude to Beijing on Beijing's terms. By 2024, Ecuador had already promised away 90% of all its exportable crude to China, tying the nation's lifeblood resource directly to debt repayment. And even that wasn't enough. Burdened by debt, Ecuador slashed public jobs and social programs just to keep its head above water. By 2019, frustration boiled over. Ecuador took Sinahydro, now rebranded as Power China, to international arbitration in Paris, demanding accountability for the cracks, failures, and environmental wreckage at Coca-Codo-Sinclair. By 2025, the government was asking for around $400 million in damages. The arbitration zeroed in on 3 issues: shoddy construction, who should pay for repairs, and the soaring costs that crippled the project. Then geopolitics replaced the courtroom. On June 27, 2025, President Daniel Noboa met Xi Jinping in Beijing. Xi hailed Ecuador's entry into the Belt and Road Initiative and bragged about a new free trade agreement covering energy, mining, and infrastructure. Just weeks later, arbitration was abandoned. Ecuador and Power China cut a deal. The outcome stunned many. Power China pledged $400 million for operations, maintenance, renewable energy, and storage projects, while also taking over management of the dam itself. Officially, it was framed as support, but critics saw it as a trade-off that cemented China's control over Ecuador's most important energy project. The Andres Bello Foundation noted it provided short-term relief, but deepened Ecuador's long-term dependence on Beijing. Ecuadorian leaders tried to calm public fears. Non-energy minister Ines Manzano insisted to Dialogue Earth that the agreement was neither privatization nor a sell-off, just a temporary arrangement to keep the system running. Chinese state media quickly defended the project as safe and long-lasting, while blasting foreign outlets like the New York Times for biased reporting that ignored China's side of the story. But experts in Ecuador see the danger differently. In 2025, researchers Sebastian Naranjo Silva and Juliana Romero Borromeo issued a sobering warning. Unless erosion and sedimentation are brought under control, Coca-Cola Sinclair may collapse well before its promised lifespan. Working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they outlined 3 urgent fixes. The first is dredging, removing more than 250,000 cubic meters of sediment clogging the river. Cost, about $2.4 million. The second is massive, building reinforced structures to stop erosion from chewing closer to the dam. This would cost $63 million, but it's the most effective safeguard for the river system. The third is technological, modernizing the sediment traps with sensors, auto-cleaning systems, and small dredges, at a cost of just over $2 million. All told, these solutions add up to around $71 million, pocket change compared to the $3.2 billion the country already spent. And with the dam losing Ecuador $3.4 million in domestic revenue, or $4.5 million when importing Colombian power, every day it sits idle, the fixes could pay for themselves in just 3 weeks. The authors stress that these measures are realistic, affordable, and could even create jobs while easing social unrest tied to blackouts. But they warn strongly against radical fixes like ripping out turbines or rebuilding tunnels, moves that would void legal claims against Sino-Hydro and bury Ecuador under even more costs. Their verdict is clear. Coca-Cola Sinclair can still be saved, but the clock is ticking. If Ecuador doesn't act now, the country's most ambitious hydro project could crumble long before reaching half of its intended lifespan.